that for a long time, and I'm an asthmatic, so darn it, I take the same inhalers and everything as you guys do. Well, I never planned on taking all the cardiac meds now, so now I'm going to relate to a whole different group of people and understand what it's like to be short of breath, but to be short of breath because my heart wasn't pumping efficiently. So I didn't want to sign up for this, but now that I have it, hopefully it'll make me a better caregiver, and that I can understand what the cardiac patients go through as well as the pulmonary patients. So thank you from the bottom of my new heart for all the support and love. And Betsy was so good. She came over and helped me do some paperwork on the computer. I called her and I said, Betsy, can you help me? And she goes, well, where are you stuck? I said, at the www. I couldn't get any further on the computer. So she spent the day with me. We had lunch together. It was really, really nice. So, I mean, just Carol's helped me with my disability, and Joseph, I kind of, you know, poor Joseph. That's all I can say. And Sarah, they're going to hold the fort down for us for a while. But I'm not far away. You can leave me messages or whatever, because this is what made me get to where I am today. It's just the love from all of you. And especially Dr. Chang. He has texted me like almost every day to see if I'm okay. And with all this love here, how can I not be okay? So I just wanted to thank you all for your support, your love, and your prayers. Okay, that's it. Betsy and I are going to announce who's new and who's here and that kind of thing. So first I wanted to introduce our new grads, but they're really not new grads. I think they have a week left.
They do.
They have well, they're almost new grads.
Almost new grads.
And that is Kevin and Monique. So raise your hand, you two. Welcome. We do this every month. We've been doing this every month for over 30 years, so you're always welcome to come to the luncheons. People we haven't seen for a while, I wanted to introduce Cheryl and Tom Shingerling. Where are you? There you are. Welcome back. And Joanne and Dwayne Kelly. Welcome back, Joanne. So good to have you back. And Winnie is back. Where's Winnie? Raise your hand. That's right. Rumor has it, her and I are going to share a treadmill, cardiac rehab. But anyway, it's good to have you back, Winnie. We'll share a treadmill. And then we have Joyce brought a friend with her today named Ann. Welcome, Ann. And Patricia is back, Hobbs, from having heart surgery. So welcome back. I have a new place in my heart for cardiac patients. So welcome everybody. And I think that's it, Court. I just needed Betsy here with me because she's my best bud. Oh, Betsy's here today, and she's always here. She's my new best bud, who knows how to work a computer. Yay.
Thank you very, very much, Jackie and Betsy. Well, I now have the privilege of introducing a terrific board member that's been a member of the board for a long, long time, a woman who also runs the whole raffle program and a myriad of other activities and gets all these gifts. Please welcome Mary Lee Coe.
Thank you very much. Thank you for your donations. You guys are what makes the raffle go. And I really appreciate it. And we just asked for a little bit and it poured in again today, so I really appreciate it. We're going to do something today that usually we only do in January. We're going to ask you to validate the board, members of the board elected, the new members and the chairperson. So get ready we started in June, and with Dan's leaving, we needed a new chairperson, and we also had to have some new board members. So I was chair of the nominating committee, and Karen Thompson and Edna Murphy and Jackie Tosselini were on the committee. We solicited input from all the board members. We had meetings and phone calls, and we came up with the following. First, for the new members of the board staff liaison, Sarah Albright, would you please stand? Member of the board, Ann Jones, would you please stand? And Finn Martin. The way it's done is that we then voted in July and elected these three as new board members, but you have to validate according to the bylaws. So now I would ask you, for those who want to validate, would you say aye?
Aye.
Any negative? They are now elected new board members. We also had to elect a new chairperson because Dan, of course, left to go to his house in Banning. And we went through the same process and got input from everybody and elected Kurt Antonitis. Kurt, would you please stand? I'm going to ask you to validate the election of Kurt Antonitis for chairperson. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mary Lee Cody. First of all, I just want to thank the nomination committee, the board, and all of you for saying aye for my new position as chairperson of the board. I didn't say chairman, I said chairperson, which is politically correct. And I am really, really seriously honored to have this position. I'm humbled by the position. There have been previous chairpersons of the board, Terry Nielsen, Dan Buck, I think Ruby, and so many wonderful, outstanding chairpersons. So I really have big shoes to fill, and I will do my very best to try and serve the needs of the board and also everyone here, because the board serves all of you. Our purpose is just to run all the programs and serve the needs of the group. And the board is committed to doing everything that we can to have terrific lunches, have terrific events, have great happy hours, have a great Pep Talk newsletter, and with the new blood that we have on the board and kind of new energies in the board, I know that I can speak on behalf of the board and say we are really committed to taking care of all of you. And we will do our very best. And if you have suggestions or ideas, please come to any board member or come to me and say, hey, you know, I want to do X, Y, Z or whatever. Please, that's what we need, is good feedback from everybody. Mary Lee introduced the new members of the board, but I want to refresh your memory of our current board membership. And I want to remind everybody that being on the board is not a boondoggle. We don't get free lunches, we're not paid, it's all volunteers, we don't get 1 red cent. The only reason that we are on the board is to serve you guys. And so I'm honored to introduce fellow board members and just briefly what they do. And the co-chair person alongside me, the person that would take my duties if I can't make it or I can't run a meeting or whatever, is Pat Cottrell. Pat, please stand up. She does so much. The treasurer, which is one of the toughest jobs on the board, keeping track of all the money, is her terrific husband, Art Cottrell. Art? And the co-treasurer, Art's right hand person, is Karen Thompson. Where's Karen? Oh, Karen, right here. Okay. Secretary, also one of the toughest jobs on the board, Edna Murphy. Come on, Edna, raise your hand. And backing up Edna is Nancy Kimball. Nancy. communications chairperson also is Pat Cottrell. She wears lots of hats. She's wearing a hat right now, as a matter of fact. And Nancy Kimball is her co-person and backs her up when she can execute the duties of the job. We have a wonderful young person who is putting together the database and doing about 400 other things, and that's Jocelyn Dannenbach. Jocelyn is Terry Nielsen's right hand, and Terry is Chairperson Emeritus, which is a pretty darn good title. Terry, please raise your hand. All the decorations you see in this room is Gretchen and Karen. So please, you guys, stand up. Gretchen, come on. Every week we have different decorations. It's a lot of work to do. Ways and Means Chairperson, Bibi, please stand up. A big job. You already saw, but I want you to stand up again. Mary Lee Coe for all the work in the raffle. The raffle and 50/50. Edna, raise your hand. Edna runs the 50/50 program. I think you're getting the idea that everyone is multitasking on the board. They all have a lot of jobs because we don't have enough people to do everything. So if you ever want to volunteer to be on the board, please approach any board member because we're always interested in new people joining the board. Okay, Pep Talk editor. Sarah is our new editor of Pep Talk. And June Robinson is kind of our field reporter.
Right.
So if you have ideas and stories of interest, please give them to Sarah because we really need information to have a lively, and I don't know if you saw last month's Pep Talk, but that was Sarah's first handprint on the newsletter, and it's just outstanding. It's graphic, it's colorful. Give her a round of applause. And the website. Art Cottrell is running the website, and his backup is also Sarah. Sarah and Art are both working on the website. Give them a hand, please. And our historian and archives goddess is Nancy Kimball. Okay, we're almost through. The lending library, which is something new, and we're going to have more details in the next issue of Pep Talk. As you know, if you have medical equipment that you need or you want to give away, we have a lending library where you can borrow wheelchairs, walkers, canes, a whole gaggle of stuff. So that is being run by Karen Thompson. Karen, raise your hand. And our new board member, Finn Martin, he's our at-large member. And he hasn't quite figured out where he's going to put his hands because he just joined the board, but believe me, we're going to load him up. So please give Finn a round of applause. Ann Jones, another new member of the board, but someone who's been around for a long time. She's handling bereavement and happy hour and kind of a large member. And staff liaisons. Jackie and Joseph, please stand up. So, one last round of applause for all the work that the board does. And now I'm going to introduce Mary Lee Coe, who's going to do the raffle and the 50/50, and I think and Ann Jones, okay?
I'll grab the drum.
Shake them puppies up.
While they're getting that stuff ready, remember next Tuesday is a happy hour. So hopefully you can come to that. And we also have a picnic that I'll tell you about right now that's coming August 17th. So next month, instead of having a lunch here, we're having our great annual picnic. It's going to be at Victor Park. I think you all know how to get to Victor Park, but in case you don't, it's off of Anza, north of Torrance. You go north on Torrance and take a left on Emerald Street, and you run right into Victor Park. It's a lot of fun, the weather's gonna be great, and I know you're all gonna enjoy it. So without that, I'll turn this over to Mary Lee.
The first raffle gift is 3 summer necklaces plus a pair of earrings. And Ann is now going to pick up somebody to pull the raffle ticket.
You gonna come stuff eggs? Yeah, pay attention.
And the winner is Rita.
Not again.
The next gift is a set of summer wine glasses. Beautiful glasses. Winner is Archie. He needs him to go with the wine, right?
They're brandy.
C's Candy. We do this every month.
You know, a box of See's candy is $25.
Phoebe says it costs $25, so then the cards are even because the gift card is also $25, so the C's Candy is not. And the winner is Cheryl Slendering. The next gift is the whole conglomerate picnic, barbecue, gardening helpers, and that includes, of course, the picnic basket, a bunch of other really nice things. And the winner is Robin. Very good.
I got the wave.
Yeah, we'll hold this up here because it's too much to bring back, but your name is on it.
Look at my wave. What is that for?
Okay, now for the Home Depot. Pat. Pat S. All right. She does such a wonderful job with the callers. We really appreciate her.
Uh-oh.
Now the 2
Shopping bag.
shopping bags. We are mixing them up.
Me?
Oh, Phoebe wants
I
it too.
can't do this.
Terry SAT. We'll keep him up here.
I didn't get it.
And now, of course, the 2 bottles of wine. By the way, the wine, I've had both wines, and they're very, very good wines today. Excellent, as they usually are. But these I know personally. And the winner is, drawn by Carol, the winner is Homer Lowe. All right. Now for the 50-50.
Yep. I know.
And
Just have it. This. It's not break down, just tell me.
we always have the speaker pull together. So we're going to ask Dr. Stringer to come up and pull the 50-50.
How much is a 50-50?
I don't know.
It's a bunch of money.
Wow, good pull.
The amount of the $91. 71, sorry, 71. David Hobbs.
I told you, yeah.
Big money.
Thank you, and thank you again for contributing, and we'll see you next,
Now
not
you-
in August. August we do bingo. and
I didn't
we'll
know.
do Raffle again in September.
Now you can go play at the casino.
Thank you, Mary Lee. All right, our next speaker. You all know her. You go to exercise. Is Carol Sakamoto. Carol, she's the lady that just is cool, calm, and collected, but she's the big boss. She doesn't wear all the stress of the job. She's got all the politics she's got to deal with at the hospital, and she just handles it magnificently. She's a great, wonderful person, and it's my privilege to introduce her. Carol.
I think that was a little overboard, but thank you. I have the great privilege, first of all, being here, yay. But I don't like the reasons why, for any of the reasons, but anyway. I'm introducing a physician that really needs no introduction. Everyone knows him. He's been with us. I just found out today he's been at the hospital since 1982. Just a little before my time. I came later from another hospital, but anyway. Dr. Chang is going to say a few words to us.
Thank you, good afternoon, everyone. And my thanks to Carol, Joseph, and Kurt, who's the only one who can predict that the weather's going to be good 2 weeks from now. You didn't tell me about the Hawaiian thing. I was born in Hawaii. I come dressed as an Italian. As you know, I'm going to be giving a little bit of a retirement farewell today. And I wanted to begin by thanking all of you. Loud enough?
Hold it straight out.
Thanking all of you who have supported the program over the years. First, I want to thank the PEP board. I have to thank them with Kurt here. Because they have kept us on our toes. They scheduled a lot of fun-filled activities. I know that the casino parties were fun. And I hear that the happy hours are also fun. It goes back a long ways. They have actually produced cruises in the past to the Caribbean and to Mexico. But now we're doing more safe, more frequent, and more inclusive bus tours. Some of them to casinos. So I also want to thank the board for providing funds to purchase equipment, especially the oxygen concentrators that have allowed many of our patients to travel abroad and airlines and on cruise liners. So we thank that board. Now I want to focus on our rock stars. Betsy Barnes, Jackie Tosolino, they've already been introduced today. They have helped to teach and manage the rehab program through thick and thin. Always keeping in mind the mission of rehab, which is to enhance the quality of our lives, to prevent further illness and exacerbations, and to diminish the effects of shortness of breath. can really restrict us. So they're not above tweaking the program though. So we've had unusual activities that are unique to our group, such as core strengthening in our maintenance program, and also more recent chair yoga, which helps breath control, calms anxieties, helps with back problems. So the two of you have been exceptional, bringing your talents and creating the best pulmonary rehab program for people in our community and beyond. So I'd like for the two of you, Jackie, Betsy, to stand up. And also Joseph too. I know, but I want them to see great round of applause. We're so proud of you. May you continue to improve the lives of many more people in the future.
It's our passion.
I know it's your passion, and you've been so dedicated to it. So I thank you. Now, on a more personal note, I want to thank my patients for being so, patient with me. Don't laugh too much. So there have been inconveniences such as long office waits and getting lost in the parking lot trying to find my Palos Verdes office. But I've learned from many of you about yourselves and your lives. And I thank you for that. There is a beautiful German word that describes what a doctor-patient relationship can be. And that word is Mitgefühl. If I pronounce the umlaut right, it's Mitgefühl, which literally means feeling with. It's difficult to translate. It's a little bit more than compassion or empathy. It's sharing life's experiences and its inherent health challenges, its ups and downs. So in sharing this has made me a better and more fulfilled physician, and I thank all my patients for that. Now it's time to reset the clock for our program. So it is my pleasure to introduce our speaker for today and our new medical director for pulmonary rehabilitation at Providence, Dr. William Stringer, who is professor of medicine and a physician educator at Harvard UCLA. Now this is my training alma mater and the training program that provided us physicians like Dr. Brian Wong, Dr. John Abe, Dr. Darren Sinkwitz. So Bill brings the expertise, the energy, and the perspectives of the Harvard team with him. And this is a team that's well-renowned internationally for its research on the management of shortness of breath for people with chronic lung diseases and cardiopulmonary disorders. So we look forward to this opportunity to cross-fertilize two programs. One, a leading clinical research program, and the other, outstanding practitioners of rehab and community supporters. So Bill, as I look at your CV, I noticed that you're a very eclectic speaker with diverse topics such as lung cancer screening, airways, stents. We've been interested in this sort of topic for a while. Even non-tuberculous mycobacteria, and many other topics. But he's really a multifaceted Renaissance man who has interests in music and history. And I looked at your lecture list, and there were things like the value of humanities in medicine, and one topic which was from Civil War to Civil Rights, vignettes in American medicine. So his talk today is going to be on music and medicine, and I think you'll find it fascinating. So I'm going to pass the torch symbolically to Bill.
Oh.
gracious and strongest support.
So that was a very kind introduction. I'm humbled by getting to be invited here to speak to you. I'm going to talk a little bit about music and medicine, but I'm really going to focus on how music can help us overcome chronic illnesses. And I know a lot of you deal with chronic illness each day. I've been sick, I've been hospitalized. I think I have some understanding. I don't have lung disease, but it's an important thing to use music, I think, to understand our own limitations and our own challenges and to overcome those. And I think Beethoven is actually probably the best example of somebody who used music to really soothe their own soul and to improve their own life, and I think improve the lives of others. I think there's very few of us that they'll be talking about us in 200 or 300 years. I'm positive they'll be talking about Beethoven in 300 years. So any music teachers, music majors, any, you're a Jeep person, I don't think.
No, I was giving Betsy the cue to increase the volume.
Oh, call it closer? Okay.
Closer
I don't want to
towards you.
overcome. Okay, so, yeah, I'm pretty sure you're not a music major. So I don't claim to know much about music, but I do use medicine to make my living, and hopefully I can show you the medical aspects of Beethoven and how he used music to overcome it in a little vignette at the end that I think you may be able to use when you're having some tough times with chronic illnesses. Anyway, so I'm going to walk back here, and that does sound better though. So I'm just going to start with a little bit of music here, just to kind of get you in the mood. I'm not going to be able to play these pieces in totality because we don't have enough time, but I will at least introduce them, and they're all labeled at the bottom of the slides. I'm happy to send the slides to you later if you want. But let's see if this is going to work and if it's not too loud. Sorry, I have to do that, but to move on. But I don't know how that makes you feel, but it makes me feel like somebody who really feels triumphant, really overcoming some difficulty. So we're going to talk a little bit about Beethoven, his sort of ideas, principles, those kind of things, specifically his health struggles, and how he used music to get over those. And what was probably the cruelest blow of all to a composer was to go deaf. And finally, the events of his death himself. I don't know if you can read that, but it says, "Shh, the maestro is decomposing." Anyway, so he actually lived to the age of 57, born in Germany, obviously died in Austria. He was a composer, and that's what he's most remembered for, but he did spend his time doing music instruction, pianist, and was quite a skilled pianist. But when he worked, this is the kind of things that came out. It wasn't perfect. Like Mozart wrote things out almost as if it was a dictation. But he would scribble things, spill coffee on it, go back and cross things out. This is the way his music lives. This is actually the Fifth Symphony, which I'm sure you have heard. But if you listen to people describe music, which is a difficult thing to do without hearing it, but they talk about Beethoven's inspiration as a view of the highest elevation. So using religion, ethics, philosophy, the arts, that this was something that he was able to wrap into his music. And this was 100 years after this person's death. So again, just imagine somebody waxing this poetic about somebody 100 years after their death. He had a very difficult childhood, and I'm going to talk about that first 20, 22 years. His early adulthood when he was most successful as a pianist, and then his late adulthood when he was most successful as a composer. And we'll talk about his lifetime works. And if you haven't seen pictures of him as a child, actually he was fairly cute, big eyes, those kind of things. And at the time that he was performing, he was really quite flamboyant. But as he went further into his life, you could see his face, quite a different change. as he got further into his life. And he was only 57 at the time he died there in 1826. These are drawings that were done at the time that he was alive. So he has, at the time, the genre of music, he composed things that were as good as anyone could do in all these different genres. So you're talking about chamber music, orchestral music, choral music. He did religious music, operas, piano. Piano is my favorite part of his. And he actually did a reasonable amount of vocal work. His family wasn't the greatest, I guess. Both his father and mother died at fairly early ages. And his own childhood, there were 3 children. The middle child, Caspar Karl, we don't have a portrait of, but that's Beethoven there. That's Nicholas. And then this Karl van Beethoven, the nephew, was a struggle late in his life for essentially to bring him into his own family away from Karl Kaspar's family. So there was a lot of anxiety there. So a very unhappy childhood, alcoholism. He was concerned through his whole life that he had tuberculosis. His mother died of tuberculosis, and anytime he got a cough or a cold or a fever, he was sure he had tuberculosis. He didn't have much education. He stopped at 11 years old, which would be about 6th or 5th grade for us, mostly. And imagine being a self-made person. He was very precocious in music, had a wonderful instructor, and I think that set him on his lifetime mission. By the time he was 22, he moved to Vienna from Germany to be away from his family. He was described as being very confident, but he had a very, very short stature. He sort of walked with his head forward. You'll see this in some of the other images. And he had a very large head compared to his body. So he was sort of an unusual looking guy. This is the piano. Anybody play piano? Okay, so take a good look at that keyboard. What's wrong with it? Short, very good. So there's 2 octaves that are now on modern pianos that weren't there. But Beethoven composed for the entire keyboard octaves that weren't even existing at the time that he was performing. He had these stubby little fingers, and this is actually supposed to be him performing for Mozart. Whether that actually occurred or not, maybe apocryphal. But Mozart was alive at the same time he was in Vienna. But this is the description, and I think most of us who do play piano wouldn't want this to be our description, but he says he carried on in a fiery manner. He treated the instrument like a man bent on revenge who his arch enemy in his hands, and with cruel relish wants to torture him slowly to death. He pounds so much that suddenly the maltreated strings go out of tune, several fly towards bystanders, hurriedly moving back to protect their own eyes, and he makes harsh sounds. We can only hear a disgusting mixture of tones. Is this description exaggerated? Certainly not. Now this was a piano maker in Vienna who resented the fact that he destroyed every piano by playing it that he was given. But he was one of the foremost piano makers in Vienna. So by 1805, deafness had begun. And he understood it. I'll show you a little timeline later. This is the way he walked. That picture over there on the right was drawn at the time. He felt that since he was supposed to be excellent at music, becoming deaf was a huge embarrassment to him. And he really became very hot-tempered, disheveled, misanthropic, quarreled with people, quarreled with his family, was described as being a very foul individual. And yet, he had all these things going on that a lot of people didn't know about, including the deafness, including alcoholism. He had never had a family, never married, no children. And out of all this chaos, and anybody country music fans? So what makes a good country music song? Pain, suffering, agony, despair. So there's pain, agony, suffering, despair, and the best compositions that he ever did. So he had a few love interests. It's a little hard to know exactly who his immortal beloved was, but I want to play you just a little bit of the Moonlight Sonata. You'll recognize it almost instantly. Just a second. that go, but there's clearly somebody that's in love. So his health-related illnesses started as tinnitus or ringing in the ears. That was 1796, and I'll describe something that might have happened in 1796 that may have caused this. He had abdominal pain through his whole life, had lots of problems with his stomach, was thought to have pancreatitis and inflammation of the pancreas. As I mentioned, was alcoholic. He had asthma and bronchitis, and suffered from depression. He struggled over custody of the nephew, as I mentioned, for years and years, and was quarrelsome with his entire family. Never married, and yet his most amazing musical works. Okay, so this is kind of a timeline. By 1824, he was completely deaf. In fact, he wrote, he had people come to him, they would write questions, and then he would verbalize answers. He could still speak, but he couldn't hear at all. His first deafness was 1796, and then the Hagelstat document, 1802, was essentially a suicide note, and I'll show you a little bit about that and what might have happened if he had killed himself in 1802. But Vienna was actually under siege by Napoleon. If you've ever listened to the emperor, he actually had great respect for Napoleon until he found out what Napoleon was really like. And the siege of Vienna was quite loud and caused a lot of ringing and discomfort in his ears. The last time he ever performed as a pianist was 1814, and then, as I mentioned, was completely deaf by 1824. But the Ninth Symphony was completed without being able to hear a single note. So I don't know if any of you folks actually have had audiograms, but what they're doing is they're looking from low frequency to high frequency, and these are decibels of loss. So 100 decibels is about not being able to hear a jet plane go over. So 100 decibels is at the bottom there. You can see he starts out with mild loss in 1800. By 1810, it's 50 to 60 decibels. And then by 1820, essentially, he wouldn't be able to hear a jet plane going over. So he was essentially completely deaf. He used a lot of instruments. He was actually quite suspicious of physicians because he'd gone to them his whole life trying to get his hearing fixed. And you probably realize that physicians weren't very good at fixing things back in the early 1820s. We're still not as good as we should be. But he used a lot of these devices. I don't know if anybody remembers, I can remember at least one person in my family a long time ago that had one of these earpieces they used to put on instead of using a hearing aid. But he would use those to be able to hear it. He'd also take a stick, and he would actually put the stick in contact with the piano so that he could actually feel the notes, not hear them, but feel them. So, interesting. The cause of his deafness actually isn't known. I'm going to give you at least one hypothesis, but there's lots of things that were thought to be either atrophy of his auditory nerves, that's the nerve that goes to your ears, syphilis, which is an infectious illness, obviously, Paget's disease, which is a swelling or the increase in size of the bone, Meniere's is a chronic disorder of the middle ear, and there's even thoughts about lead, but I think the most likely version is actually related to typhus. So this is a description in 1796. This is when he first noticed his change in hearing. He came home on a hot day, sort of tore open his garments, and what he found was that it took a long period of time for him to convalesce from this illness, this febrile illness. And typhus was actually very common down there because of all the armies marching through Europe. It's called a louse or a lice is the plural. Rickettsial disease lives on them, and as they bite the individual, they transmit the disease. So it's usually related to not washing, using garments repetitively, those kind of things. And it's easily killed by just washing. That's my little louse in the washing machine there. But this wasn't really discovered for about another 100 years, the actual mechanism. So they didn't understand typhus. Typhus is actually easy to treat. You discriminate it from Rocky Mountain spotted fever, you may have heard that before, by the way the rash either starts in the hands and comes to the chest, or starts in the chest and goes out to the hands. Okay, so easily treated with antibiotics these days, so it wouldn't have been such a big deal. But since this is a steak place, I was going to put down, if your cow sounds like this, you can fire up the barbecue. Okay, and if your cow sounds like this, you might go with the fish. So anyway, so that's mad cow disease. At the time, there's been a lot of attempts to try to look at the music that he was composing as he was going deaf, and trying to understand how he was feeling about it. And I think that this particular area, the sonata in D major, I'm going to play you just the start of it, and just see if you can feel his pain in this. So he wrote letters to his closest friends actually announcing that he had this problem, but he didn't make it public. And he basically said, I avoided society. And you may feel like this sometimes. You have a chronic illness, you don't want to be around other people. And I think one of the great things is you guys arrange things to be at each other and share your suffering, share your difficulties, share your successes. That's a huge positive that you do. And I think this approach is the wrong approach, but he basically shunned society, shunned people. He basically drove everybody around him crazy and away from himself. So I don't know if anybody's a Goya fan, but this is Goya. What it says, de que mal merida. What it's saying is that the doctor there with the ears is holding the patient's arm, the pulse, and the pulse obviously isn't there, and he's saying, well, what did the doctor die of? And you know what the other name for donkeys is. Goya also was deaf. So in the face of all this going deaf, being a composer, being sad, being an alcoholic, being depressed, having all sorts of medical illnesses, he also said, I want to grab fate by the throat. This is certain. It shall never bring me down. About how life is beautiful. I'd be happy if the devil had not made his home in my ears. These are things that he told other people. So at times he was almost like a bipolar. He would be very depressed and then he would be very optimistic. But in this document in 1802, and I'm not going to have too much time to go through it, but he basically describes what a hopeless case he's been. And eventually, right here, so with only a little more, I would have ended my own life. This is 1802. Okay, this is before essentially anything that he composed that we value today. So if he had killed himself right then, we would have exactly one symphony of his. And the first one is not considered to be his best work. So 3, 5, 7, and 9. It's interesting, the odd numbers, I like odd things, were his greatest works. So just imagine that if he actually had killed himself, and not, obviously we still don't do a great job treating depression these days. And I'm going to skip that. But the Ninth Symphony, he actually combined music with words. And the words he couldn't hear anymore, the music he heard in his head, and I think that the reason he brought words into the Ninth Symphony as opposed to any other symphony was the fact that he couldn't hear it anymore. And so I want to just play you this brief thing. It's a little bit loud, so I may have to turn this down, but we'll see. So that's actually the words in English there. It's from Schiller's Ode to Joy. But he felt the need to talk about that all men are brothers and dwelling in your safety of wings. Really talking about how we're all a unified whole, not individuals and not pulling against each other. Okay, so I put this in for Dr. Chang here. This is Beethoven on his deathbed. These are all the concerned physicians looking around thinking, if this guy dies, this is going to be really bad for my career. So I don't know if Dr. Chang ever had that feeling. He probably never did because he did such a great job. But they would summon the best physicians to take care of these very important people that would die. And I'll show you, they actually bury people in the Austrian cemetery based upon what they do. So his final illness, he had actually been out in a snowstorm, and he was coming home in this open horse-drawn milk wagon, because I can't imagine that was much fun, but he called it the devil's own vilest wagon. And he just talks about how he developed this hacking cough and was sick and feeble after the trip. So this is one of the doctors that saw him. Talks about the symptoms of pneumonia, which we're pretty comfortable with these days, signs of inflammation, and that he was pretty sure that he wasn't going to make it. But on the 8th day, he was just getting worse and worse, vomiting, diarrhea, and he felt that he wasn't going to make it. The chronic illnesses that Beethoven had were related to things I've already mentioned, the deafness, the depression, asthma, alcoholism, but he also had problems with frequent headaches, GI symptoms, etc. So these are the sort of chronic things that he had. And then at the time of his death, it seemed that he had developed either acute or acute on chronic liver disease, and I'll show you why that's true in a second. He developed ascites, which is fluid collection in the abdomen. If you've had somebody in your family have ascites, and it says that his belly got bigger and bigger at the end, which led him to wear something to bind it. If you've seen people wear binders for ascites. He actually had 4 paracenteses, which is sticking a needle in the abdomen, and he had the most wonderful description of it. So he had this fluid drawn out, and he said after a few moments of serious reflection, Beethoven gave his consent to the operation. So that Beethoven, happy to see the water pouring out, called out that the surgeon reminded him of Moses, who struck the rock with his staff and brought forth the water. And so most of my patients don't come up with that literary description of their paracentesis. But I thought we should probably incorporate it into our procedure notes. But he did develop an infection at the site, but he was tapped 4 times between December and February. So it was a prolonged illness. At some point, they were convinced this was related to alcohol, but at some point he was complaining so much they gave him his alcohol back. So this is the other one that's just wonderful, and my Latin isn't good, but plaudete amici, comici finite est. So applaud friends, the play is over. That's his last words. And he's laying there unconscious in a hepatic coma, and what happens is at around 5 in the afternoon, there's a flash of lightning. There's a violent clap of thunder, and what he did was he opened his eyes, he raised up his right hand, stared up at the heavens for several seconds with his fists clenched, and this sort of very tough look on his face. And then it sank down to the bed, his eyes closed, and he died. It's sort of an interesting description of death in this particular individual. So one of the interesting discussions is what actually caused his death. It clearly was related to some degree of alcoholism, but there's always been an assumption that he either had syphilis and was treated with mercury. Mercury was as toxic as anything you actually had. It turned out there was no mercury in his body, and it's unlikely he actually had syphilis. But he had tremendously high levels of lead in his body, probably enough to actually kill him. The lead was from piping. They used to actually put together piping with lead solder, and he also drank wine that actually had very high concentrations of lead. So between those two, he actually had very high levels, and they were able to test both his hair and actually a piece of his skull, and they were both very high in lead. So this is his burial. He was very well respected at this time in Vienna. And then the central cemetery, I'm going to just show you a picture of it. This is what it looks like, his gravesite. And I'm just going to play you a little bit of the Ninth Symphony, which again I think is just a wonderful work. to leave that, but what I'm going to tell you is that they bury people based upon what you do in that cemetery. So that area is all composers. And hopefully the good ones. So what I want you to think about is how did he use music to soothe his own soul? He wrote magnificent music, but also how did he use it to soothe other people's soul? And so he had a piano student. This lady was one of the best pianists in Vienna. She lost a child in 1818 and came over to his house. And we actually have no idea what actually was played, but I'm going to give you at least my thought about what happened. He played for about an hour, not talking, just playing. And then what the lady said at the end is, he told me everything and at last brought me to comfort. So imagine sitting down at a piano and trying to console somebody about the loss of an individual. I can't imagine how to do that task, but I'm going to show you something that I think may actually reflect that. This is called a rondo, so it has verses that repeat. It's going to take about 5 minutes, but 5 minutes well spent. What you're going to hear is it starts slow, very low pitch, and very minor keys, and then it slowly speeds up, it slowly goes to a major key, and then it actually starts to syncopate the rhythm. And by the end, you can just feel sort of the release of whatever the problem was. So you can imagine just a great loss or becoming sick and getting over it, those kind of things. And at the end, he comes back to the same line he started with, but it no longer has the same kind of pain it did at the start. So if you hear all that in there, you're probably as crazy as I am. But I'm going to play this for you. This is actually a spectrogram of the music, and these are all the different frequencies. I'm going to leave that up while I did this. This was done by a friend of mine. But I want you to just listen to this as the rondo starts and as it becomes syncopated to major key, goes up in pitch, and just sort of drives away the demons.